It is a remarkable shift underway. The news were that indeed overnight the final problems in the ceasefire agreement between Hamas and Israel were solved, at least to a certain extent, with all kinds of problems still very much to be solved. But it seems that Smotrich agreed that to basically stay in the government. He's against the agreement, but he stayed in the government. Ben-Gvir is against it and he left. But this is not enough to bring down the coalition of the Netanyahu government. So I think it's definitely a very important step in the right direction. Now, even the German SWP representative, that's a German think tank in Berlin, a woman today on the radio said that this is a deal which was ready already last May, but it took obviously Trump's team to intervene, to put pressure on Netanyahu to get it through. And that is an unbelievable thing because that totally confirms what we have been saying all the time, that all of the horrors which have happened would not have been possible without the agreement of the Biden administration. And that I think will have an aftermath. But that aside, for the time being, the final vote will take place tomorrow. So far the IDF has been killing dozens and dozens of Palestinians while the ceasefire was supposedly agreed upon. And naturally, with President Trump coming into the White House on Monday, there is indeed a chance that this could resolve the situation. And I think the fact that he, did make good on his word that he wants this deal before he comes into the White House and that it is happening shows a certain resolve. And, maybe the video which Trump had put on his X account with Jeffrey Sachs accusing Netanyahu of the crimes he was talking about may have been an additional pressure. However, given the fact that the situation is absolutely horrendous, and according to Aida Tuma Shiman, who is a Knesset member of Palestinian roots, she had basically said before that all parties in the coalition are for the total cleansing of Gaza and are for the continuation of the operation in the West Bank. So, it's still an absolutely gigantic job, which I think does require the international peace forces, the peace coalition, but also everybody else to make sure that, a real settlement of the crisis can be accomplished, which, according to my view and many, many other people, does require the immediate recognition of a Palestinian state. And, obviously that state cannot function if there is not an immediate, not just reconstruction of Gaza, which is completely flattened to the ground, but it does require a real peace order in the entire region, which we have provided with the Oasis plan. If we could somehow encourage the Trump administration to really go in into a real peace building by getting the countries of the Middle East together to implement the Oasis plan, then this has a real potential to solve the situation. Now, on the same day, today, the Iranian President Pereshkin is in Moscow signing a peace strategic agreement with Russia, with Putin, and that obviously is also a new factor in the situation. So this is very promising. However, I think it still requires an enormous change in the situation, given the situation in Syria, given the tensions between Turkey and Israel, given the overall destruction of the region by the meaningless wars of the last decades. So I think that that is very promising. And, you know, the situation in Ukraine, which is the other major ground, you know, one can expect that, you know, the very careful signs between a discussion which may start between Putin and President Trump very soon, that could also bring the situation, you know, hopefully to some resolution. However, we should be acutely aware that the British are trying to instigate continuous escalation, as it was demonstrated by the sudden visit of Prime Minister Keir Starmer in Kiev. Yesterday, this was the first visit since he came into office, and immediately he proposed a 100-year treaty between Ukraine and Great Britain. Now, to my knowledge, the election term in Great Britain is 4 years. So why he can promise a 100-year treaty really goes beyond my understanding. If one doesn't think that there were people already in the past who thought about a 1,000-year Reich, and that didn't go so well, as we all know. But it is clear that the Hawk faction is intending to keep this conflict simmering, as it was demonstrated by the last Ramstein meeting, where the different NATO countries split up in groups of 2, each pledging that they would take over some of the areas which they think will be abandoned by the United States with Trump coming into the administration. And also Starmer promised an amazing 40 million pounds for the reconstruction of Ukraine. Now one can estimate that this is a 3-digit billion number which is required. And, you know, BlackRock is already totally ready to, and they already have positioned themselves very well to take over whatever is to be taken over. So that situation also remains one which does require a change. Now, the other key question for what will Trump do? I mean, there is many things which come from previous administrations, including his own, but also the Biden administration, which is the strategic posture of the United States. Now, there is this program for the modernization of the nuclear arsenal, which is in motion right now. This is the entire 5,000 nuclear warheads, 400 ICBMs, 1,000 ballistic missiles on submarines, and the entire warheads on the air bases in the United States and abroad are supposed to be modernized basically in the next 10 years. According to the Congressional Budget Office estimate from 2017, this is a cost of $1.2 trillion. And according to the Nuclear Posture Review, you know, the right for the United States under extreme conditions, when the vital interest of the United States is threatened, they preserve the right to use preemptively nuclear weapons, and they refused to sign any no first use agreement. Now, the question is, will Trump change that? Because this is extremely important, because if you remember, President Biden in March made this change, which we only found out from the New York Times in August, the so-called O-Plan 8010-12, which defines Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran as the enemies. And, you know, Biden had basically said that the United States has to prepare a NATO visit to launch a confrontation against all of these simultaneously. And there is still supposed to the new B61-12 nuclear warheads are supposed to replace the old B-61 bombers, and these new weapons have their own targeting device, and there are stealth technology. So that means that the Russian reconnaissance can recognize them, if at all, in the last minute, which is too late. So that increases the danger of a mistake in the attack. Now, and with the New START agreement, as of now, having no follow-up, running out in about a year, will that all lead to an enormous new nuclear arms race? Will the adversary relationship be continued, even if these immediate crisis spots are basically, resolved or at least calmed down? I think this requires a much, much more fundamental shift. And, we from the IPC, at least for me and some of my collaborators, we have been saying the whole time that in order to get to peace, it is not enough to stop the wars and regional wars, but we have to overcome the fundamental antagonism of geopolitics. Geopolitics is a relic of the past. It caused 2 world wars in the 20th century, and it absolutely must go if the world is supposed to be safe. Now, that means that the Western countries must stop the idea that there will be a war between the United States and China. There will be a decoupling, de-risking. All of these things are part of this geopolitical thinking, and that we have to move the world to a new paradigm where the Western countries are cooperating with the global majority in their effort to overcome the effects of 500 million years of 500 years of colonialism, and that we have to work together to overcome poverty, so that the people who are now fleeing as migrants from Latin America, Africa, the Middle East, that they have an incentive to cooperate to build up their own economies. And if we would get the Western countries to cooperate with such organizations like the BRICS in that project, we would solve the migrant crisis in the only human way it can be solved. And such a collaboration could be the basis for a peaceful world order, a new security and development architecture, which takes into account the interests of every single country. And, I think what absolutely has to go with that for it to succeed, we need urgently a cultural renaissance in the West, because under the doctrine of neoliberal values, we have allowed the best traditions of our respective countries to be forgotten, to be trampled upon. And we have to revive the best periods, the classical periods in Europe, the spirit of the American Revolution in their anti-colonial fight against the British Empire. And we have to really put the world community on the tradition of the best what mankind ever has produced in each nation, in each civilization, and then have a dialogue of civilizations among them. And that, together with an economic reconstruction, is the basis for peace. Now, I think that's a wonderful perspective. And I think if people think that's a utopian conception, they miss the point what is going on already in the global south, where the Asian countries are proudly looking at their 5,000-year-old history, or 3,000 or 4,000 years, and they're taking out of that cultural heritage the strengths, to define a positive vision for the future. And I think we in the West have to do absolutely the same, and then cooperate in crash programs for thermonuclear fusion energy, in international space research and development. And then we can build peace not only on the planet, but beyond. So I want to end with that. I think we are at one of these conjunctures where it is time to readjust the policy and go in a much more positive direction. That's what I wanted to say.